Welcome back to episode 4 now of Oh No No No, the Raith Rovers podcast. I'm tonight's host, Robbie Weir. We're making up a trio this evening. Now, I'm not sure how this will go in terms of the all-time Raith Rovers trio, whether we'll be a Gary Wales, Graham Weir, Kevin Smith trio, or whether we'll be Joe Custrain, Yawose, and Andres. What was his surname?
Andreas Thorson.
Thorson, waft. Tonight, I'm joined by the usual host, Duncan Cameron. Welcome back, Duncan. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. And debutant, as I've been complimented on saying by Mr. Ian Latto for this evening, is Michael Watson. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm good, thank you. Delighted to be here. And hopefully the debut will be more Didi Agathe rather than someone who had a less glorious debut.
That's all right. That's absolutely fine. Well, fingers crossed for that. I think, obviously, you've been down in Berkshire. I think the only thing that we can relate to Raith Rovers in Berkshire is probably Tony Rouget's spell at Reading in the early 2000s. So, yeah, that's a throwback to that. So, looking ahead, we have got a Challenge Cup. We had to figure this one out, a fourth round tie. Coming up on Saturday against Montrose. Montrose currently sit third in League One. The last time that we played them was the infamous season that got cut short, where we beat Falkirk to the league. Right. And if you've seen the preview on the Raith Rovers website, there was 2 goals from a certain Mr. Kieran Bowie and a goal from Ross Matthews to see off a 3-2 win. I think that was a late comeback almost from Montrose, but we managed to hold off. So we'll take a bit of a dive into the game, have a bit of a look about what's going on at Starks Park this Saturday, because there's a few events going on. We'll have the big question as we usually do, and also as well a bit about the Twitter chat that we had, sort of looking into a certain Mr. Robert Sloan, who is now a follower of this podcast. So welcome in, Bobby. Delighted to have you. I'm not sure if you ever get called Bobby, but we'll see. I'm sure you'll let us know soon enough. So, yeah, to start off, obviously, Montrose, they're the highest placed team in League One out of the big two, we'll call them, Falkirk and Hamilton. They seem to have started the season reasonably well. Duncan, just come to you, obviously. What are your sort of thoughts leading into this game, obviously, looking in terms of Montrose? What are you expecting from
them? It's definitely going to be an interesting one. As you say, third place in that division, but I think it's 5 wins and 4 losses. But they've been on better form recently. I think they lost 3 of their first 4, which, if my math serves me correct, means they must have won 4 of their last 5, possibly. I did watch their highlights from their win over Alloa at the weekend. First of all, I was very confused. If you just punch Montrose into YouTube, you get a lot of videos from Sammy Hagar's first band before he joined Van Halen. Okay. So I get quite down the rabbit hole there, but managed to get myself back out again to watch those Alloa highlights. Judging by the highlights, they I think they got a wee bit lucky in that one. It looked like a fairly open game, and they've definitely got decent players, but I think they can be got at too. Sean Dillon's a very good defender, but as we keep talking about on this podcast, with Jack Hamilton aside, the movement and the kind of pace that's in that attacking front line, I think if you're Dylan Easton or you're Callum Smith or Lewis Vaughan, Sean Dillon's probably the archetype defender that you'd choose to play against. Mm. You know, he wants the ball in the air. He doesn't want you in and around his feet. So an interesting one, certainly.
Yep. I think that's a fair assessment. Obviously, you look in terms of the depth that Montrose do have. Kane Hester seems to have really upped his game, actually, I think, since Rory McAllister left. I think that, again, listening to a lot of the other sort of podcasts and analysis about sort of the lower leagues in Scotland, and you look at that division and you do think it's kind of going to be a match made in heaven. Rory McAllister always provided goals, whatever club he's really been at, pretty much. Throughout his career, whether it's been at Peterhead, I think he was at Brecon before, and Montrose, I don't think anyone was expecting any different. But yeah, Hester seems to have done reasonably well since he joined them from Elgin. They've also got Michael Gardine in there as well, Graham Webster, and the lad Lyons, I think, who went to Partick for a little bit, but he's back with them now. So, Michael, obviously, you're tuning into Rovers from down south. How do you feel the start of the season's gone, and what are your sort of expectations going into Saturday?
I think it's gone extremely well, actually. Didn't know what to expect with some new signings. Obviously, a lot of activity off the field as well in the summer, but it's gone exceptionally well, and I'm delighted with where we are. I guess one of the key things is whether we can maintain that. Obviously, if not everything's gone our way, it never does in the game. But yeah, can't complain at all. One of my only concerns, I guess, if you can call it one, is that I have no idea what our strongest lineup is. There are so many options on the bench that if one player were to have a bad game, for example, you might have, for example, Josh Mullen might not have the best of games. Then you have this dilemma: do you drop him, bring Aidan Connolly back in? Has Vaughan been benched? Do you bring him back in instead, etc.? But then you also have scenarios where maybe you don't drop him for somebody else, and then he produces a magnificent cross that somebody has a nice little header against the post and puts the rebound in the net.
Yeah.
So there's a I do think we have got some way to find out what the strongest 11 is. But on the other side of that, the other thing is that if things aren't going our way, as long as we don't have the classic problem from years gone by and too many players injured, there's a lot of options on the bench where things can be brought on to change the game up.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely delighted with the way the season's gone. I've been a bit disappointed that Jack Hamilton's going to miss a few weeks. I know he's not necessarily had a hugely prolific start, but he's a classic centre forward. He's good in the air, and he's also very capable of the old poacher's goal. So I'm hoping he manages to get himself back to fitness as soon as possible and try and get him back in the team again, because we don't have another player in the squad like him. Obviously, got Vaughan, Gullen, etc. up front. Totally different type of player, and I think they could benefit a lot from playing off Jack Hamilton.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment, and I'm hardly going to be dishing out world exclusives when I say I was actually down the gym on Monday and saw half the squad. I don't talk to them because I'm an absolute shite bag. But yeah, I just leave them to their business. The only one I've ever spoken to is really Ross Milne, just checking before the Cali game whether he'd be back from injury. But yeah, Jack Hamilton was down there among the others, and again, you can't really look too much into it, can you? But at the same time, hopefully, as you say, he's back for Saturday. So I think Saturday's probably a good question to ask you then is, do you think it's going to be a good game for getting the bounce players in? I mean, if you look at the lineup and you've got lads like maybe the younger lads like Andy McNeil, for example, being out on loan, not had much game time with ourselves. On top of that, Adam Masson as well. He last started, obviously, came into the game against Airdrie, but then hasn't had any game time since. Do you think those younger lads should be getting an opportunity? Maybe lads like Connolly as well coming back in after longer term injuries. Do you think this is a good opportunity to do that, or would you sort of go all guns blazing into the sort of fixture?
I'd definitely be making the changes. Perhaps I'm still scarred from the Challenge Cup issues a few years ago when we lost Aaron Lennox for the season against Montrose, I think it was actually, wasn't it?
It was Brora, I think. Brora Rangers, I might. Yeah.
Apologies, yeah.
I can't even
so
say
we
it
lost
right.
We lost them for the season, and that obviously had a negative impact because the keepers that came in to replace them, will be kind and say, had their issues. So from that perspective, I'm always getting nervous now. It's completely triggered me, that one. That anytime we're in this tournament, it's like, don't play the first choice keeper. Keep them safe. Play the reserve goalkeeper, and you do have to give the other goalkeepers a shot as well, because you can't expect them to just suddenly come in from nowhere and do the business. So any opportunity you have to get them a run out, I think is always a good one. And a cup tie against a team in the league below us is certainly a good opportunity to do so. Aidan Connolly as well. I'm assuming he's now at a place where he would be capable of starting and hopefully getting a good 65 minutes into him. I think that's important as well. We know what he can do. He's a fantastic player, and it seems that it's something you think would be unthinkable last season, but he's not an automatic first pick at the moment. There's so many options in there, particularly Josh Mullen, for example, coming in. Callum Smith also having a nice run of form as well in the season. He's not an automatic first pick now, and he's exactly the type of player that we want to be in and around the first team. I would certainly have him in too. In defence, Adam Masson, as you mentioned, I would look to be starting him. Again, obviously the Airdrie game didn't really quite go the way maybe he hoped it would in the end, but ultimately players don't improve unless you get them some game time. And on top of that as well, if there are any players that have perhaps been maybe on the cusp a little bit with injuries or have slight niggles, then always it's a good opportunity to swap them out for a week and maybe give them a little bit of a break, get them maybe 20, 25 minutes on as a sub if necessary. But I'd certainly be looking to, as all those players, I'd certainly be looking to get a start, just mix things up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And Duncan, I think we kind of saw that a little bit already when we played Cliftonville in the last round of the cup. Obviously, Robbie Thompson came in and played from the start. And I think it might have been a fair assessment to say, now, I am very, very biased in this. I'm just going to get this out the way. Callum Hannah's family sit behind me at the football. Lovely, lovely people. And I was sitting next to his grandfather that day. Who obviously we're all itching to see Callum make his debut because he's just a thoroughly good lad. Just really, really nice lad. Good head on his shoulders, sensible, and just he's so delighted to be at the club right now. And I was itching to see him make his debut that day. But obviously Robbie Thompson gets injured and that takes one less sub away. So the question for yourself, Duncan, do you think that's, again, we obviously saw that in the last round. Do you think it's a sort of opportunity just to sort of carry that on? Would that be something for yourself that you'd want to see, or are you very much a dyed in the wool, we want to go as far as we can, cliche machine?
I am a cliche machine, that's definitely true. On this subject, though, I'm probably somewhere in the middle. So I was hastily scribbling a starting 11 there, mostly to make sure I didn't forget anyone, which I'm prone to do. I would keep Kevin Dabrowski in, for one thing. I think he needs minutes as much as anything. He's 25, he's a good age, he's not had a huge amount of football. It's a Saturday, it would maybe be different if it was a midweek, if we had a heavy schedule, there was a lot of games going on, but I would be inclined to keep him in there.
So it's a good point, but who are we going to see Alan Trout and Cruyff turn after dispossessing away at Clifton Hill inevitably at some point future when we lose him to injury?
Well, just get some sort of Slovakian loanee
ninja
camouflage trouser toting maniac. I'd roll the dice on that. I think as much as every single Challenge Cup game we play, our goalkeeper does get injured, like Spinal Tap's drummers. I'd play Dabrowski for this one. I think I like continuity in my goalkeepers, and unlike John McGlynn, I would keep him in for that. Robbie, don't look at me. I'd probably play Liam Dick as well. Yeah, I would hopefully get Callum Hannah off the bench, get my debut at home, but I would probably keep Liam Dick in, because what I would like to do is start Adam Masson and get him a good proper bit of game time there. And I think what he doesn't need is another young player in that back line.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think it's easy enough to bed in if you've only got one. That again is a reason for keeping Kevin Dabrowski in. In terms of who Masson comes in for, I think there's a question mark there. Ewan Murray's been carrying a shoulder injury. If he could do with the rest, I would play Masson and Brown. Now, that's not ideal because it means Adam Masson's not got a proper centre-half next to him, but Liam Dick's there. And I would play Ross Millen because he is our only right-back.
It's fair enough. Well, we could play McGill there.
So, McGill I've got starting somewhere in the midfield. I just feel like he's due a shot where he wants to play. That would be the starting point of my starting 11, actually. I would let Scott McGill play where he wants, Bobby Barr style. Let him go out and just do what he wants, and then build a team around him, because he's filled in everywhere else, and he's done it without complaint as far as I'm aware. So I would have McGill in from the start. I would have Connolly in from the start. Masson, as I say, I would start as well. And then really you're just sort of plotting in around them, with the only other sort of preference for me would be to rest Sam Stanton. because a little bit like you said, Michael, about the fact that we don't really have another Jack Hamilton. I don't think we've really got another Sam Stanton either. And opportunities to rest him are going to be few and far between. So I would take Stanton out, probably put McGill in there. So my hastily scribbled lineup is a 4-1-3-2 because Ian Murray seems keen on it. And if you can't use it against a team in the division below, then really when can you? So if Brown's not in defence, then pick either one, Brown or Byrne, to sit, whoever needs less of a rest, I suppose. And then McGillen at number 10. I've got Easton on the left, but it could be any one of a number. Connell on the right, and then Smith and Gullen as a front two. With Jamie Gillen under strict instructions not to just tear off onto the wings again, as he always does. Always.
Did you get upset about that one on Saturday there, Duncan?
Yes. Yeah. I was quite
I turned
it was
to
a
Ian
really
Latto.
good...
I turned to Ian Latto and I just said, it's exactly what he said. He said that he'd run out wide, and I understand that he's got the work ethic and he does it with good intentions, but at the same time, when you're trying to play him as a number 9, I can understand everyone's frustration as well.
Like, I mean, I said, I think it was Blair that made the point, and I kind of tried as politely as I could to argue with him in that preview podcast, which is, so if sometimes you need a striker who's going to run the channels and is going to move around and drag defenders around, but sometimes you just need someone to aim for the penalty spot and be an option. And that was exactly what happened there. Was it Dylan Easton, I think, was running through, only had Jamie Gullen ahead of him. Easton's already starting to kind of bend his run to the left, and Jamie Gullen goes left as well. And
it's like watching two cars merge further and further left on a motorway.
That's exactly it. And it's like, I nearly took out the guy next to me because it was just like, get into the middle, because Easton obviously has only got one option. So Easton plays it into the channel for Jamie Gullen, who looks up, and there's nobody there, because as I said last week, like, that's you. You're looking for you, because we're playing one up front and it's you.
See, Duncan, my issue is that now that I am forever in Jamie Gullen's debt for that goal against Inverness, that has ended that misery that just continued to perpetually just exist in my life. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned,
don't misconstrue this as anti-Jamie Gullen propaganda.
That's exactly what I'll do.
Only when he's supposed to be playing as the sole striker. I think Callum Smith's a really good example of how to play those two roles and wear two hats almost. If Callum Smith's on and he's playing as a winger, he plays out wide, he takes up those spaces and he looks for balls into the middle. But if he's playing up front, he stays central and he plays on the shoulder of the last man. Whereas Jamie Gullen just seems to always be on the move. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's certainly, as I say, it has its uses, but sometimes that's not what you need. I think last season, much more so than this season, it was a problem.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like you can almost actually get into a point where work ethic can become a hindrance, because he just works so bloody hard. Like, he just like watching a dog chase after a football. It's just like, I just tears away. But no, I think I can understand completely where people are when they're talking about this point, and you just want to have that sort of. It's like I mentioned about Jack Hamilton, obviously almost suffering because being a target man and the number 9 at the same time. I think it's almost a sort of having Gullen being a number 9, but then he turns into a sort of inside forward type player just with the movement. So to get back on track, Michael, I'm going to ask you, if we had Keith Watson fit, would you start him from the start for this one, given that he's obviously missed a few weeks?
No, I'd keep him on the bench and only bring him on if necessary. Obviously, he's missed a couple of games now. There's been some sort of, will he make it, will he won't? Obviously, he hasn't made it. So it makes you think that maybe his injury was a little bit more substantial than you otherwise might have hoped it would be. So I seem to recall that before Dundee United, there were some whispers, maybe he'll make the game, maybe he won't. Obviously, he didn't, wasn't in the squad. So I'd certainly give him up the time to rest that he needs. As I say, though, if he was in a place where I guess he got to maybe sort of like 85% maybe, I'd put him on the bench just in case he was needed. If, for example, he started mass and then he were to get injured, then you might start to worry what you might do. And then if he's there, if you absolutely need to bring him on, you can bring him on to show things up if necessary for the last 10 minutes, or if somebody has to go off injured for whatever reason. So no, I wouldn't. I'd definitely give him the time that he needs this week to make sure he's back and as fit as possible for the next league match, because ultimately we're probably touching upon a future topic here, but the league is far more important than this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Carry on, Duncan.
Sorry, Robbie. I was just going to see if your inside knowledge from the gym or indeed anywhere else, you get any indication on Dylan Corr and what his availability is? It seems like he's been close for a long time.
So after contracting my chest muscles as much as I could, doing pec flies, I did not spot Mr. Dylan Corr floating about the gym, which I would guess would mean that he's still injured. What's interesting is you'll usually see them in with sort of the physio if they are injured. So obviously that'd be Lorden or Blair. You would usually sort of spot them down there, which sounds... I'm just realising how creepy this actually sounds right now. But yeah.
All right, mate. Just tell them about your podcast and it'll be fine. That'll explain it.
Aye. But yeah, it's obviously you notice the players that are injured. Obviously, your sort of players that are sort of there, and it tends to be in a smaller group, obviously. But no, I did notice on the sort of inside match day thing that Rovers released for the Dundee United game that one player was on crutches with Callum, Adam, and I'm not sure who else was there. But yeah, sort of going by the trackside. So I think they did have their hood up. So I'm going to guess that was Dylan Corr, given that he is a bit younger and they'll probably know those lads. But yeah, there's not obviously been any sort of further indication as to what's happened with Dylan. And I hope he does get back soon, because this is exactly the type of game that you want Dylan Corr back for, or just an opportunity to build up his confidence. It's interesting speaking to, again, the people that have sort of watched him play at a youth level, because he said, see, even as a 14, 15-year-old, absolute unit of a player. Like, he's got all the attributes to go and kick on. And you do, again, he seems like just a really nice lad. You watched the interview that he did with Davey and just sitting down and chatting about it. His dad used to play, obviously, in goals. He was at Celtic, and then I know he was at Ayr for a bit. But yeah, it just seems like a really nice family, and you just want them to sort of kick on and just obviously have that opportunity. And I know that he's only signed that 1 year deal, and I think both parties have kind of said, we'll see how it goes. From his perspective, he's probably thought, get a load of game time and then be able to kick on and move up the ladder. Rovers probably says, obviously, give him a chance and see how it goes. And I thought it was quite interesting when they did come in, because he is sort of like the first signing that we brought in. And again, it's one of the ones that probably did fly under the radar a bit, because then after that, I think the signing after was Jack Hamilton. And then after that, we signed Josh Mullen and then Callum Smith. And you're thinking, oh, Christ, we've signed a lot of players that have got a lot of experience and are very good at this level. Whereas with Dylan Corr, nobody really knew what to expect. And he gets chucked in the deep end in a Fife derby. And then he has the game at Annan. And then after that, the injury comes, and we've yet to see him again come back into the squad. So I really hope that the lad gets a chance to build up his fitness and obviously kick on and just being able to move forward.
Yeah, definitely. As you say, he looked really good. I thought he pre-season, he just looked kind of beyond his years. I was quite impressed, and I think naturally he would have dropped out of the team when Ewan Murray came in. But as you say, these are the kind of games where he would absolutely be getting minutes, and it's a shame for him that he's missing out. But it's an opportunity for someone like Adam Masson to come in. So interesting to see how that defence comes together, because there are certainly options. If you want to rest anyone, you can do, but there's maybe not perfect replacements. So it's a trade-off. But as you said, Ian Murray swapped his goalkeeper last time out. He's obviously prepared to make changes for this competition.
100%. So I think that the overarching question sort of that always crops up with this tournament, and I'll just ask it now. Michael, you kind of sort of touched on this. obviously the Challenge Cup, I know that Danny Denham has once referred to this as within the dressing room at East Fife, I think he was at the time, as the Jobby Cup, as it was called. Do you think, obviously, we've had a lot of success in this competition over the last few years? We've obviously won it at its peak when Rangers were in it, and I think everyone would agree there is no chance that we will ever get an opportunity in this competition, barring unless we pump Dunfermline for 5 or 6 in a final. You're not going to get better than that day against Rangers. But do you think it is worth the effort, or is it just, as you say, obviously, I know that you touched at youth, your sort of the viewpoint that the league is sort of more important. But then again, for a lot of these players, maybe it is the best opportunity to get their hands on some silverware. We win this one, we're into the quarterfinals, and we've had a track record of getting to the finals. So do you think it's maybe a bit different for the players, or how do you think that would come across, Michael?
I think it really depends on how the team itself was actually doing in the season. Obviously, we the last season we had the final appearance against Hamilton, which unfortunately we lost. Putting aside my normal feelings about the cup, I was pretty disappointed about that because ultimately we weren't having a very good season in the league. In fact, from about February onwards, you could see that we weren't in any danger of going down, but we also weren't really going to. You could see everything falling away, and we weren't going to make the playoffs. And there then came that ridiculous point in the season when we were the only team in the league that had nothing to play for. So from that side, the season was a bit of a bust, and winning the cup would have been a nice little distraction from that perspective and bring a little bit of joy, which it can do. I mean, it's not the most important cup. It's I wouldn't quite as go far as to call it the Jobby Cup. I usually use the Diddy Cup. I was being disparaging about it myself, but yeah, it's not something I've ever got too excited about. Although the hypocrite in me does tend to get a bit happier when we get to the latter stages of it. So there's a sort of stage where I'm not that bothered, but when you get to the quarter final, it's like, okay, let's see how this one goes then. Then even in the semi-final, we had the game against Kilmarnock, for example, where we obviously won, got to set up the final, and then you also had a couple of quite nice moments as well in the penalty shootout against Dundee as well, being quite an interesting one with Robbie Thompson bamming all the Dundee players up and then saving the penalty. So, it's I guess my take on this is I'm a bit of a hypocrite, and I'll become interested when we get to the latter stages. For the players, it's hard to gauge, but again, I think maybe if the season's not going quite so well, it gives them something to work for and something to look forward to. So it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out tomorrow, given how we started.
Yeah, I think that's a fair summary. To be honest, one of the big actual sort of, not so much, I wouldn't call it ever a regret, but one of the games that I wished I'd been at, I didn't go to, and it was right before COVID, was the away day at Partick Thistle, or the away evening on I think it was the Friday night. I did find an amazing pizza restaurant in Edinburgh, down in Gorgie, but yeah, that looked an absolutely rocking away end that night. There was flares going off on the concourse. I don't know, did you get along to that one, Duncan? Or?
I was at that one. I think it was Valentine's Day.
Yeah, well, that was why.
But that that was an excellent atmosphere, and I think kind of proves the point of it doesn't really matter that it's the Challenge Cup if you're winning. I think it's quite an easy go-to almost defense mechanism. And not to say that it's not true, but as soon as you get beat, it's very easy to go, it was a Challenge Cup, it's fine, who cares? Yeah. But at the same time, it's still games of football. You still get good moments in it, and certainly if you win it, it's enjoyable. The thing for me, so Saturday, we've got a game, which is good. I prefer that. It's different when it's Tuesday nights and you're having to trek up north somewhere or go to Wales for some reason. But it's a free weekend. I understand there's people who like to get to Scotland away games and it causes bother for them. It's not a position that I'm in. So I've never been quite as down on the Challenge Cup as others have. I certainly think the inclusion of the underage teams sullies it to quite a fair degree. That is my one major point of contention. I'm actually very surprised they're still doing it because it doesn't stand up to any kind of scrutiny.
the clubs from like Wales and Northern Ireland, and I don't know if are the teams from the Republic of Ireland still doing it. I don't think they are they?
I've got no idea. They seem to just spin a
and
wheel.
Change. But to be honest, I would absolutely fucking love an away day at somewhere like Northern Ireland. I think that would be class, just in terms of the opportunity.
Yeah.
My best friend, his girlfriend is from Larne, I believe it is. I'll get a bollocking if that's wrong. But yeah, it would just be a real opportunity to sort of go somewhere a bit different. And again, just sort of see what the experience is like. And to be honest, following some of the stuff, the content, like I know that lad Blair McNally, Partick Thistle fan, who does a lot of away days in terms of like just covering grounds and sort of that sort of football vlogger content. Some of the stuff that you see from Republic of Ireland in particular actually looks a really good atmosphere, and that's what you want to see. And one thing that was interesting about the Partick Thistle away game that I didn't get to was that it kind of almost felt like it was like the birth of the sort of young team sort of environment at the Rovers, like with this sort of flares going off on the concourse. There was a bit of buzz Friday night, people having a bit of a drink and then going to the football. And to be honest, it's if that's the sort of thing that it can provide for the club, then I'm all for it. I know that obviously the sort of young team element, there's probably going to be a lot of people that maybe raise eyebrows or question certain bits of it, but it's just local lads going to see their local football team having a bit of a day out. And to be honest, we've all probably gone through that phase when we were younger, depending on how extreme it's been. It might differ. Obviously, there's elements that we understandably do need to nip in, stuff like the pitch invasion. But that's obviously, it feels like it's a bit of younger fans. Whereas the lads that are up the back singing before with stuff like that Partick game, just the atmosphere on the back of that, you just think, aye, that's going to be the type of stuff that's going to get people sort of out their seats, wanting to be involved, especially for younger lads. So yeah, all for it. So is there any final thoughts on our fourth round fixture against Montrose before we go
on? Just to say that I think it'll be a decent game. We mentioned a couple of times in there, we've talked a lot about, swapping players around and the fact it's a team from the division below. I think we've maybe neglected to kind of give Montrose their due, largely because I don't think between the three of us we know a huge amount about them. But it is worthwhile saying they're obviously a decent side. They have been a decent side over the last few years. I think it'll be a very good game. And the fact that we're talking about moving players around, I think is no disrespect to Montrose. I think it's actually more a reflection of where our league campaign has been so far, and that we've got players who are in really good form but who actually just need a rest. And for possibly the first time in a long time, we have legitimate options on the bench for players who are properly knocking on the door, needing a start as well. So I think it'll be an interesting one, definitely. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if it's a very close run thing.
Yeah. I think that's fair enough to agree with. Now, it would be remiss of me to mention cups and Raith Rovers and not say that we had a very successful cup run in 1994 that led to Bayern Munich, which in turn mentions Germany. So Oktoberfest is coming to Starks Park this Saturday. Graham mentioned earlier on to me that they're going to have a bit of a shindig in terms of the Raith suite. It's going to be open from 12 before the match. Lots of stuff going on there. You've got John Greer of this parish talking about the sort of reminiscing back towards obviously the glory days of the early 90s. Scott Thompson's going to be making an appearance as well, and a couple of people from our podcast as well. So I'll be going along, potentially maybe one other. So if you do get the chance, batter in. Feel free to come along. It's free entry, and the beverages should be flowing and give a good run up. Looking forward to obviously Saturday's game against Montrose. Is that something that for you guys, do you think it's something that's quite positive to see from the club, that they're sort of coming in with these initiatives and opportunities?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's probably worth mentioning. I think it's free entry, but you have to register in advance.
They didn't tell me that.
So. Did they not tell you that? I read that somewhere.
Maybe that was me. Maybe it's just me.
Maybe you don't. maybe you don't. Check first, though, because you don't want to be turned away at the door.
That's the level of professionalism that I bring to this podcast, Duncan. So, yeah.
Well, I read one tweet
just
earlier. Sorry, Michael, on you go.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's good to see that the club's trying to make an effort about these things. I get the impression maybe it's a bit unfair. Obviously, I don't live nearby and will probably inevitably miss things that others might pick up. But I got the impression that the commercial side of the club had really fallen down and that I'm not going to quite say we weren't trying anymore, but we weren't doing anywhere near enough about to get people in the door with things that might entice them. So hopefully with this, it's the sort of thing that will entice people to go along. Maybe if there's kind of on the edge, will I go to the game or not? Oh, there's this Oktoberfest thing going on. It might be something that just brings a few more people in and gets them interested.
Yeah, I think that's. I think it's fair. I mean, without sort of speaking out against anyone that's been with the club historically, I think there's been a lot in the works that's now coming to fruition. That's probably even predated. Obviously, Duncan, you'll know as well. From we were both involved with the fan panel that was set up before, and a lot of the stuff that Ben and Laura came out with is sort of stuff that's worked in the longer term that's came to fruition. So again, talking about the away kit that's been so successful, that was something that they'd mentioned sort of very, very early doors, that it was going to tell a story and historical ties. They didn't tell us what story it was going to be, but they did sort of mention beforehand. So when you see it come out and you think, right, that's what's happening with this, and just to watch it all come, because obviously these things don't happen overnight. But yeah, what a stellar job obviously that's going on at the club at the moment. I know it's very easy to sort of go into happy clapper mode, and obviously I think people from the outside probably have quite envious looks, but as well at the same time that works as well for the positives, because I can see already sort of, I think there's been a mention among Dunfermline fans sort of saying, we've got German owners, but we're not doing this. Why are they doing it, but we're not doing it? So again, props to everyone that's been involved, because I think it's very easy to sort of sit there and like I've touched on it a few times, whether it's been on here, whether it's been on Twitter, but they do deserve a lot of credit for taking the steps to sort of build up and sort of engage with the support and sort of to try and also build the fan base. I know that Saturday is not exactly potentially a high bumper crowd, but even in the home games before, we've seen such a big change in terms of the atmosphere, the acknowledgement of like people coming along to games, how important it is that you belong. So yeah, I think just within the local community, it's been really, really good to see. And again, probably a bit of this podcast is down to the fact that there's been such a sort of engagement that you can sort of feed into, and stuff like this kicks off. So yeah.
Yeah, if I was to kind of categorize the commercial stuff from beforehand, I think it would be kind of good people working under shite conditions. It is the way it looked to me, where you've got the guys on the ground as part of that sort of commercial team. You mentioned Ben and Laura, there's others involved as well. And again, this is very much what I could see rather than anything I was told directly, but it felt to me like they were coming up with the ideas, and a little bit like Blair said last week when he was talking about the social media stuff, he was being told like, yeah, actually, hang fire, don't worry about that. And it just felt like there wasn't the buy-in previously. So your commercial guys are coming up with all the ideas they can come up with, but if every time they take them upstairs they're told there's not the money for that, or nah, we didn't really see the point in that, you're never going to see the results. And that seems to be the biggest change, is that there's that willingness to try stuff. I've been as critical as anyone of that sort of the outcome of that singing section trial. The way that it spread fans across too wide an area, it seemed like the noise was dissipating. But the willingness just to try it, to go and do it and see what happens, and then assess that and either keep it or get rid of it. That just willingness to try stuff is refreshing and is massively contributing, I think, to the general atmosphere that's around.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment of where things are at the moment, and I think it will be interesting to see how things go over the next few months, because again, I think it's probably quite easy for people on the outside to sort of say, but you're winning games of football. And it's easy to do. I think it was yourself and Blair that sort of spoke about it's not so easy to meme on things when you've been pumped 4-0. But again, you've just got to sort of accept the rough with the smooth. And I think that it will be interesting to see how things go just in the longer term. And I'm very excited to see what actually comes up over the next few months as well, because obviously there are some very big events. You've got sort of the Hall of Fame night coming up as well, that I fully hope that we could, obviously at some point we'll get John Greer back on to obviously speak in a bit more detail about that, because that does look a really interesting event, and it's again something that seems very fan driven. One thing I would mention as well, just to sort of talk about the social media side, is that, yeah, it was really good to see the sort of engagement. It got brought up about a certain Mr. Robert Sloan got mentioned, and there was the question getting raised on social media: is Robert Sloan the best dead ball specialist that's been involved with Rovers? I think the consensus overwhelmingly was yes. I think it's between him or Ryan Conroy would probably be, and there was a few shouts for Craig Brewster in there as well. But just to say, yeah, thanks for to everyone who's sort of got back on that debate. Something that we fully encourage. We want to see obviously as much interaction as possible. So yeah, just really great to see, and obviously I noticed that it led to conversations between sort of Blair Hopcroft, and he's talking to sort of Robert Sloan and Wayne Henderson, our old goalie coach, and things like that. So it's just nice to see, because again, Blair mentioned this before, that a lot of clubs will just sort of maybe ignore what's happened in the past, and maybe former players, and talking about how things have gone, and sort of recounting the glory days, or it can be sort of almost like a passing kind of pat on the back. But with Rovers, I think that you get that feeling that it's got that bit of special meaning, that it's just obviously you can look at the videos at the time, of stuff like the Sloan free kick against Brechin that's on YouTube. It just sort of like the one from the south stand, and yeah, just really nice to see. And again, obviously, I've no idea what he'll be up to nowadays, Robert Sloan, but I hope that he's doing all the best, because he's delivered a lot of happy memories for our support across the time that he played for us, and just seems, again, just a really lovely guy. So thank you to him.
Yeah, I think you're right. Just in terms of the former players, it does seem like there's a stronger connection there, and it's probably worth shouting out the work that John Greer does. The Former Players Association, on the back of a huge amount of work done by the late great Ali Gourley as well. So that that doesn't come from nowhere, and credit to the people involved for making that happen.
But again, I think that clubs like Raith Rovers, I know that we obviously, you talk about volunteers in football clubs, and we obviously know it more than any club probably in Scotland, if not the UK, in terms of the impact that the volunteers have and what happens when people start making decisions. Ali Gourley, I never knew Ali Gourley, I never met him, but obviously saw the work that he did, and just seemed like an absolutely stellar character to have involved. And you look at the stuff that he does, and it goes to show you, see, if you want to get involved with the club, there's no barrier. Stuff like this podcast has just been set up by fans for fans. We're not going to be exclusive. We're not going to be exclusionary. It's very much the case that obviously if you want to get involved with the club, there's no obligation for people to do it. But if you want to take it, you've got the opportunity to. And people like yourselves are the people that do make Raith Rovers involved, like obviously yourself, Duncan, Michael. The stories that get told, it's all something that we're all part of. And I know that they've got the hashtag you belong, but it's actually very true when you think about it. So yeah, just really nice to see sort of that type of chatter. And again, it's the type of thing where if you're maybe having a bit of a rougher day, and I know that it's been sort of mental health day recently, but you can look at stuff like that and you get a wee serotonin boost of just sort of a wee dopamine hit of just that good feeling of when you think back to sort of days of past where things you've maybe had sort of seen goals or celebrations, and you just get that wee chill and you think, that was fantastic, and you're always sort of grateful for that. So yeah, we'll move on to the big question for this evening. Now we've taken a bit of a different turn with this one. Our WhatsApp chat has been bouncing through potential Raith Rovers movie ties. So Duncan, I'm going to leave this one to you to give a bit of a further explanation about it.
Yeah, this is just as you say, Robbie, something a wee bit different, something a wee bit daft. I'm going to save the best till last, because Leslie Mayburn's one of his suggestions for this is an absolute cracker, and categorically will, I'm sure, end up being one of these pre-match comic style posters. So we'll remind me to come back to that one. But I've got a couple. I've got mine are almost in the form of riddles. Not content with just puns alone. So, for example, we could have a film about a planet populated by blue aliens who keep being sent off for violent conduct. That, of course, is Davotar. Or, if you want a second one, mentioned them already, but you've got a Mercurial winger who's sent to destroy an asteroid that's on a collision course with Earth. It's Bobby Barmageddon.
I was going to go with Armstrong again, but
right, I'm going to give you one more and then I'll let you two jump in. What about the Rovers right back who overcomes adversity to become a boxer, coached by Clint Eastwood? That's the Ross $1,000,000 baby.
My head was going to Rocky Melon, which I know is rubbish, but that's where my head went.
So what else did we get out of this one? Because there were some crackers earlier on.
I only managed to really chip in with a couple. So the former Raith Rovers forward Powerhouse, who gets put into a lunatic asylum to keep everyone's spirits up.
Go on then.
Only flew over the cuckoo's nest.
I really like that. That's very good.
And the only other one I could come up with was the late 90s Nicolas Cage style free kick specialist who gets put onto a plane full of criminals. Conway Air.
Deary me. Right, hang on. I've got two more. What about the ill-fated QPR starlet who has to leave the Rovers for a career in childcare?
Go on.
That's Christian Nanetti McPhee.
I thought you were going to say daily daycare.
Right, and I'm going to give you my last one. So a Walsall loanee who's the only human actor in a festive film full of puppets.
I know the player, but I don't know the film.
It's a Muppets Christmas Carol Holly.
Carol Holly, yeah. Right, Michael, what you got for us?
Oh, well, there's no pressure here, but I'm afraid I've not really quite got to the... my creativity has not allowed me to develop any sort of taglines for them, so I'm afraid I'm just going to have to give you the titles of them. But we've got one about a dead ball specialist who does it all on his own, the Sloan Ranger.
Yep.
And one that I have to say I've stolen from Scott Fleming, which I really enjoyed, about an ensemble of characters, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardlaw.
Works as...
Go on. What I did enjoy about this one was the indirect reference to David McGurn in there as well.
Duncan, you've missed off one of the ones that was an absolute belter for you that you put into the WhatsApp.
Which one was that?
The dentist and the former slave who go about in a Tarantino film, forming with a particularly handsome former centre back.
Right,
what would that be?
That's Mango Unchained. I had no idea where you were going with that one. Yeah, I forgot about Mango Bar. There was another one as well. There was one other.
Sandy, who is yet to make an appearance on the podcast. Sandy Power, who I don't know if anyone's involved in the music scene in Kirkcaldy. His band Cornfield Chase, just to plug this, have recently released an EP and they do gigs quite frequently about the place. So he came out with two absolute belters, one of which was a Ramsden's Cup winner who can see dead people.
It's The Sixth Spence.
That's the one. And the former same surname as me, who scored at Hampden in the game that won us the league, takes a trip in Nevada with his journalistic colleagues. We're in Loving in Las Vegas.
I think there is a lot of mileage in this.
100%.
And I'm already looking forward to checking the Twitter mentions over the next couple of days.
See, if you are going to respond on Twitter, I want to see QTs. So if you can get in the quote teats and just go for it, I just want to see that. Because Yeah, as you say, a lot of mileage in it. Just some very, very silly suggestions in there about their. Scott came up with Raiders of the Lost Starks as well. So yeah, a lot of different opportunities in there. But if anyone has them and can think of any more, then we are by all means open to further suggestions.
I'm looking forward to hearing what comes from people that are cleverer than us. Because certainly, as I say, my favourite one came from Leslie, who I think is probably the cleverest of us. And it's the most obvious that's the best. And just the big Dabrowski is really, really good. And as I say, I want to see that in a comic book style illustration of Big Kev in his dressing gown. Hanging out at the bowling alley.
I mean, Scott had a few belters as well. Scott Fleming, he said Bruni and Clyde, Sean Byrne of the Dead, Pirates of the Caribbean was another one. I don't know what's up with my webcam tonight. It's obviously doing society a favour here. But
yeah, I think it's fed up with these puns.
Spotify listeners can just ignore this bit, so that's grand. But yeah, so that's obviously covering off the Montrose game tonight. If anyone's got any further film related Rovers puns, by all means feel free to leave that for us. As we say, got the Oktoberfest event on Saturday, so if you can make it along, feel free to come in, and obviously if you can get yourself registered apparently. But yeah, just again, thanks for listening, thanks for all the support for the podcast. Obviously means the world to us, and looking forward to getting back after the Montrose game just to have a bit of a chat about that, and then on to our final league fixture of this quarter against Arbroath, following on from that. So yeah, I've been keeping an eye on the Scotland score at the side, and it's still 0-0, so tenterhooks about that as well. So guys, any other comments before we go?
Nothing from me. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.